Members of the Marine Animal Response Society have been on the scene of a young humpback whale that swam up the Stewiacke River this week. The whale has died, and the carcass of the whale is now stranded in deep mud. Tonya Wimmer is executive director of the Marine Animal Response Society, or MARS. We had heard that this whale had been freed at one point. What happened?
Yeah, so we on Canada Day, actually, late in the afternoon, we got a report from several concerned citizens that they saw something lying in the middle of the Shubenacadie River. And very thankfully, we were able to work with our colleagues at the Fundy Tidal Board Adventures who are on the water anyway, and they went and had a look. And when we got the photos, we were a bit astonished that it actually was a humpback whale lying on one of the sandbars, and it was still alive at that point.
Why do you think the whale would have come up the river in the first place? I mean, how unusual is it?
I mean, it is definitely not their usual habitat. Usually they most definitely are out in, the open ocean and bays and harbors and stuff. It does happen from time to time. I mean, most of the time that we've seen this in the past, it's usually because fish are running in the scent, whether it's Gaspereau or something else that the whale follows them into the river, because of course this is, also what they eat. And sometimes they just get caught out. We're not sure that that's the case in this situation, but because it is a bit odd for humpback whales to even be that far in the back of the Bay of Fundy to then go up the river. But it definitely has happened in the past of having even smaller whales and dolphins and whatnot go up rivers.
I gather there was a minke whale spotted recently as well.
Yes, but just almost a month ago now, there was saying it's almost the same spot where a minke whale was spotted again by the colleagues that are there working on the tidal bores with their passengers. They came across the minke whale that was up on one of the sandbars, and in both cases, these are fairly large animals, and the mud is a bit tricky to work in, and so it was very the decision with both was to see just when the tide came back in if the animal would get refloated and move off, and I mean, in both cases, for both the minke whale about a month ago and the first encounter with this guy on Canada Day, that's what happened.
And in the case of the humpback whale, I mean, was the animal so stressed that it ultimately died, or is there any indication that it was struggling before it was spotted on Canada Day?
Well, I mean, that's the question really is how long it had been stranded even before the folks first initially reported it to us, which was only around 3:30 in the afternoon. So it was later in the day when the tide was already partially down. So we're not quite sure how long it was stuck there. Our responders did go out and were able to be taken out by the river rafters to at least get there and try to keep the animal cool until the tide came up. And when it first stranded in that situation and then the tide came up, it did have quite a bit of energy and seemingly swam away. The unfortunate scenario is that the next morning when the tide was back down, the river rafter folks wonderfully went and checked again, and the animal was there again on the sandbar, still alive, but seemingly much weaker. The situation for these whales are just they're such big animals. The ocean is the reason they can get to be so big because they don't have to deal with gravity like we do on land. And so once they're on land, though, all that weight is sort of pushing down on them, and that's can cause an awful lot of stress to their bodies. And often that's usually what they succumb from.
And so, what happens now? Will it be possible to remove the humpback whale and perform a necropsy?
That's what we were really hoping for. I mean, and actually after the animal passed later in the day on the second, that was immediately what we started having discussions with both Fisheries and Oceans Canada and also with the province to try to figure out if there's any way to get the animal out of the river and to do exactly that, to try to do a necropsy, figure out if there's any underlying conditions or if the animal was healthy and feeding. And the problem is this river. It's a very difficult river to have access to. There's not a lot of roads down to it. And then it's very muddy, which means we can't actually work on that surface at all because it's just too dangerous for our people and to have the heavy equipment we need. And so the animal's been sort of drifting much further down the river. It's now out of the Shubenacadie River and into the Stewiacke River, down by Stewiacke itself. And so that's where it has appeared this morning, and obviously has been causing a lot of concern, but also an awful lot of interest from people, both on the highways and from the local roads.
There are reliable reports of a blue whale, so a much larger whale, being spotted in the Bay of Fundy off Long Island, pretty close to the shore. What do you make of that, given all that's been happening with the humpback whale, the minke? What's happening out there?
Well, I mean, the oceans, these animals are pretty much at the whim of where they need to be and doing what they need to do, whether it's feeding or mating or socializing. And, for blue whales in the Bay of Fundy, it isn't a very common occurrence. It has happened a few times over the years that a blue whale will come into that area. At this point, it's nothing to be concerned about in the sense of the animal seems fine. People have been keeping obviously an eye on it and having a tremendous time being able to see such a phenomenal animal. And so really it's just a matter of just trying to keep track of them. The reality is, and this is part of the work that we're doing and why we're trying to study all these animals, both alive and dead, is to be able to figure out, are we seeing any kind of big scale changes like we did with right whales and them moving where they typically go to feed. And so that's what we're all trying to collectively do, is have that information and kind of keep an eye on things. And, right now with the humpbacks we're getting, even the minkies, and some of these sightings of, blue whales in the Bay of Fundy, the right whale that was here off Halifax, some of this is just these animals moving around. And so it's just a matter of keeping an eye on them and trying to understand the animals themselves to see if there's anything we should even be concerned about.
Tonya Wimmer, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tom.